months as an organisation, just like the rest of the sector, we've made a quick pivot across to online. And so it's a really great opportunity to welcome you to our virtual conference. Before I hand over to our CEO to formally open the conference, 3 quick bits of housekeeping. The first is to say that we want to still make this session as interactive as we can. Most of the speakers and the sessions will not just invite, but actively encourage questions and comments at the end of the sessions. And you can see from the slide that we'll encourage those questions to be posted in the chat functions through the chairs of each of the sessions, but more of that when we get there. The second thing to say is that we have a tech team on hand through the day to support you if there are any issues. You can, again, flag any issues you've got through the chat function, but there's also, as I say, a tech team that can pick those up with you directly and privately. And if you've not had a chance already, feel free to check out the networking lounge and the resources area, and there's some on-demand content as we progress through the day. There are scheduled breaks because I think that's the best way to construct these days. But when you've got some free time, do feel free to check out the resources. The third thing to say, and you can see it on the bottom right of the screen, there's a chance to join the conversation through social media. We're using the hashtag GovConf20. So feel free to share the fact that you're with us and contribute more generally. And we hope that you have a terrific day. Just before we move to the first session, I just wanted to acknowledge that this is obviously a team effort, and we've all been working incredibly hard over the last few months to not just pull this session together, but keep our activity as an organisation going. And I particularly wanted to flag the work of Andy Shenstone and Vicky Holbrook, who will be leading sessions later on in the day, for working together to pull together the content for what I think promises to be a fabulous event. And we really hope that you enjoy it. So without further ado, we've got a packed agenda in place, and I'm delighted to be able to introduce Alison Johns. I'm sure most of you will know Alison if you haven't met her. Even Alison's the Chief Executive of Advance HE, but she has a distinguished track record both within and beyond higher education, obviously a senior director at HEFGE, as was a past president of the Association of University Administrators. But Alison's influence over HE doesn't just span within the UK, internationally as well. And I'm thrilled that she's able to lead us through the first session. So Alison, over to you.
Thank you very much, Aaron, for that very generous and kind welcome. And many people who know me also know that governance is one of my passions, because I do think governance is absolutely key to the nature, the character, and the whole kind of what higher education's got to offer to students, to staff and society. And I'm delighted to be opening the conference today. We're going to be really focusing on 2 themes today. One which is about the challenges facing governing bodies as a result of COVID, and that's really turned everybody's world upside down. But, you know, I think if you look in the broad scheme of things, I think higher education has responded tremendously. And then the second, of course, is about diversity and inclusion of governing bodies. I know that this is something really important to all of you, because you keep telling us you're committed. It's the how do we do it? You know, how do we sort of break down some of those barriers? How do we crack this one? Well, part of how we crack this one is going to be a long, slow journey. There are bits that we can accelerate, and there are bits that we just got to keep hanging on in there and making sure that we deliver on it. Also, we can crack this by sharing experiences and listening to people and taking advice from people who have something to say about this, which is why I'm so delighted that Lord Simon Woolley is our first keynote speaker this morning. I'd just like to say a few words about Simon. No, it sounds like I'm boasting. I'm not. I first met Simon in number 10 Downing Street, of course, as you do. At that time, Simon was the chair of Theresa May's Race Disparity Unit, and there was a big meeting going on about race about getting into the league tables, all sorts of things. And it was at the crunch moment when the cabinet were rebelling on Brexit downstairs. The minister couldn't be there, so Simon chaired the meeting. And he did it with such skill, such aplomb, such calmness. I just thought, who is this man? I need to get to know him better. And since I have, he's been transformative to me in terms of my personal approach to this agenda and to Advance HE and how we've tackled this. He very willingly came to speak at our BAME summit this year, and he threw down the gauntlet. He threw the challenge to Advance HE. He said, what are you doing about this? Well, we just come through a three-way merger. We were still struggling to get our systems together. We were struggling to deliver our business to our membership, to you. We were struggling on so many fronts, but I thought he's right. He's absolutely right. We're the organisation helping others. What are we doing ourselves? So we took a look at ourselves, drew up a plan, and then COVID hit. But from August to now, there are 8 things that we have done in Advance HE. Simon doesn't know this. I'm going to tell him. I hope I don't embarrass you. Now, this sounds really simple. We didn't have the systems to do this, but we jolly well got on with our EO monitoring data. We committed to the REC, the Race Equality Charter, for ourselves, but we now have the timetable and the action plan about how we're going to do that. I set up a Chief Executive Race Action Group, which will be overseeing this. We have nearly finished our race awareness training, and every single member of staff are going to a 2-part race awareness training session. And we've created a race post, a lead executive race post to deliver on our work. We've created a budget, and we're holding focus groups for our BAME staff focused on their well-being and messages they want to give us. We're creating opportunities on our board for Black representation. And I'm delighted to say that we've appointed Professor Paul Miller, who is Professor of Education, Leadership and Social Justice, to be our strategic advisor on race, culture and leadership. Simon, thank you for challenging us and inspiring us. It would have happened, but not as quickly as it did. It's a pleasure to work with you. I hope what you're going to say today will help people to remove perceived or sort of things feel like barriers, but they're not actually. If you just say, right, we're going to do this, and maybe it's because I'm the CEO, I can say we're going to do this, but and so therefore your board members, you can say we're going to do this. And Simon, I think, is well known. If you don't know Simon, he was the founder of Operation Black Vote. As I said, he chaired Theresa May's Racial Disparity Unit. He's been an absolute leader in this world. And I feel like your time is now, Simon. It really is. All those years of hard work come together. Delighted to see you get your knighthood. Delighted to see you elevated to the Lords. And I know you will use that as a place for good. Simon, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, it's a good job that you cannot see me blush. But I can tell you I'm blushing. More than blushing, you've almost, on a Friday morning, and it's a little bit grey here in Woodford, you've almost brought me to tears, because I'm an activist. You know that, an activist. I wake up in the morning thinking I can change the world, and I can convince others to change the world. And changing the world seems possible right now. And having never before in my lifetime have I and you and Aaron and others have been able to have conversations that we could not have had 6 months ago, a year ago. And yet we're having them. And there's one thing about having conversations. There's quite another when people leave the Zoom room and go out and implement the ideas that we talked about. You've not only implemented them, you've turbocharged them. And let me say, Alison, that's why I like working with you, because that ideal of us being leaders, and in many ways reluctant leaders. We don't set out thinking I'm a leader. You just own that leadership space and do wonderful things. I as I said, I see myself as an activist fighting for social and racial justice. In many ways, Alison, I see myself as a disciple of Dr. Martin Luther King. I've said this before, I'll say it again. King had a dream, but even more than a dream, he had a plan. And step one of that plan was to empower people to be leaders themselves. And then together we make a difference. So I appreciate, first and foremost, other activists. And Aaron, you thank people on this that's helped bring us together. Actually, I want to thank Alison. I know that she's been the driving force, but I also want to thank Sarah too. Sarah Cutforth. She has rang me and emailed me about 150 times in the last month to make sure that I'm on board and there. Sarah, that we wouldn't be here unless you organised us being here. So thank you for that. But I also want to thank the governors for making time out and recognising how important this is. You're right, Alison, that we met in Downing Street, and because we wanted to look at higher education, we wanted to look at the universities, we wanted to look at the colleges, with that dream, that Martin Luther King dream, if you like, that things could be better. We could do better. And things have moved slowly, but now I think it's time for us to put our foot on the gas and really make the change that we've dreamt about. You know, it's kind of a little bit upsetting and a little bit ironic that it's taken great pain for us to be in this space. But that's the truth. It is what it is. COVID-19 has been thrust upon us in a way that we couldn't even imagine a year ago. This is a pandemic like no other. And there's one thing that this pandemic has laid bare crystal clear. Those areas in our society that have deep-seated inequalities in health, in education, in housing, in jobs. And in all of those areas, Alison, Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities have been hardest hit. More dying, more unwell, more losing their jobs. The education divide getting wider. COVID's exposed that and amplified it. That's one part of this awfulness that we're confronting. And the other, of course, as you know, and has been said before, is the death of George Floyd, watching a man die in front of our eyes. And I think at that moment we said, Alison, that people said to themselves, there are too many things happening in our society that are particularly happening to Black and brown people, to African nations and Caribbeans. And this has given us a moment, one, to see these things laid bare, these, as Theresa May would say, uncomfortable truths. But even more than that, to ask the $1 million question, what are we going to do about it? And it's in that moment that I get really excited, because out of this awfulness, this double pandemic, this perfect storm, what we're presented with, Alison, Aaron, what all your governors are presented with is a wonderful opportunity. An opportunity as never before to be honest, to be ambitious, to be visionaries. Can we think about being visionaries? I would argue that the first step to be visionaries, to be transformative, is to be leaders. I spoke with Aaron before. I knew Aaron when he was a young activist, table thumping activist as a NUS president. And I said, "What's happening there?" I said, "I've gone grey and you're losing a bit of hair." He said, "Let's not go there." But he said, in the interim years, I've become a governor at a few universities, and I love it. I love working with Alison, and I love being a governor, and I'm pleased. So, when I think of governors, when I think of your role, I cannot tell you enough how important your role is to the well-being of our society. Think about it. Think about being in that privileged role to govern a university that will unleash, nurture, develop the generation that will run our society, run our world. And you're in charge. I mean, does it get much better than that? And yet, I guess on a day-to-day basis, you're thinking, "Oh my gosh, another COVID case, another, how do we balance the books? How do we da-da-da?" I get that. And that's tough. But can I implore you to be the visionaries, to be the leaders that you deserve to be? And so when you're in that room and you're finished with the nuts and bolts, you are saying to yourselves, and how do we make our institution a world beater? How do we nurture a generation of our students that will come out here and fly? How do we ensure that the talent out there that might not look like us has a pathway to A, to B, to our institutions, to great success? How do we do that? How do we ensure that when we look around this board governor rule that's going to generate a generation, nurture a generation of leaders, how do we look around this board and make sure that it looks like the people it seeks to serve, and not just looks like? Because it's not just about having black and brown faces in high places. You want black and brown faces and white faces and working class faces with lived experience of these communities that you bring to the table. And then, of course, the whole becomes greater than the sum of its parts. I'll tell you a little anecdote, Alison. You know me well enough to know that I don't like talking about myself, and I blush when you were saying those wonderful things. But I'm going to talk about myself for about a minute or so because I think it's important. And I'm sure a lot of people will go through this journey, if you like. I left school with no O-levels, a few GCSEs, and was lucky enough to go into an apprenticeship. And I was a car mechanic. Fine, I love cars. Hated getting dirty. Love cars. So I like the possibility to leave car mechanics and do something else, not get my hands dirty. I relish that, and so I moved to London and become a salesman. I was selling Alison showers door to door. That makes you tough. Trust me. Every no you get, you're nearer to a yes. We used to say to our boss used to say to us. And then I sold advertising on the cinema. And I was doing well. At the age of 21, I bought a flat. Not many young people can do that these days. But then those opportunities were there. And yet, I felt something dramatically missing. I felt inferior. And that crystallization came to the fore when I was working in Oxford, and I saw these buildings and I saw these educated people, and I thought, I'm not educated. And so I felt shockingly inferior. I went back to my boss that week and I said, "Boss, I'm the top salesman, you know that, and I can do this job in 3 days. Can I go back to school? And do some A-levels?" And he said, "What are you talking about, Simon? You're the top man. You're going to be a manager." And I said, "I need education. I feel I do." He said, "Well, you've got this fighter fantasy. Choose Choose between your top job, your salary, or this fight of fantasy with education. I got my car keys out, my company car keys, and threw the keys to my boss. I'm gone, I said, I'm done. I'm done. And I went to Epping College and did an access course. I did an access course back then, access to education. And it was, for me, two things came out of that space. One, it was life-changing, the most brilliant thing that I ever did. But also, dare I say, the most disappointing. It was brilliant because two things why it was different. One, because I could read lots of books. I was a mature student back then. I was a mature student, and as mature students, we'd read the book like a dog worries a bone, every line, every sentence. And the young students would read the notes of a book and still get better marks. But that was what we wanted to do. And I managed to go to Latin America, and that was life-changing to study Spanish. But what my biggest disappointment, a feeling that you can become better people once you're educated, Alison, was that I realized that a lot of people that had access to all these books didn't come out better people. That they were still mean, they were mean-spirited, they were racist, they looked down at women. I thought to myself, my gosh, here was me thinking that I'm inferior because I haven't been to university. And yet I see people at university and their values are just nowhere to be seen. Nowhere to be seen. And then of course, I don't want to get political, but we've seen a lot of very, 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 very senior politicians on both sides that have been to the best schools in the world, the best universities, and some of them, quite frankly, let's be honest, are shockers. Why do I talk about that? Because I think that the role of the school governors to shape out what comes out of their institutions is almost as important as parenting, let me say. And I'm a father to a 15-year-old son, 15 going on 18. You know the drill, too much swagger. It's an important role. And that's why I want this conversation with you. Because when I see the numbers here, 150 or so, 180, that I want you to have that Martin Luther King spirit, to be a warrior, Aaron. We've spoken about this on platforms, a warrior for social and racial justice that you take back to your school, to your institution. You start making demands. You take no for an answer. That every child, you make sure pathways of students who might not have the best start in school can come to your institution, come in, learn, build, develop, and then fly. That's on you. Hear this, and I'll close on this, and because I want a conversation. That for all of us, in so many reasons, Alison, that 2020 has been a year like no other. We thank our lucky stars that dreadful things haven't happened to us and our family, and we've seen lots of heartache. But it has allowed us this conversation. And so if we can't make the biggest changes in our lifetime now, then when? And if not us, then who? So I hope that today will be one of the most empowering, fruitful, exciting days of many, many years, let me say. And I hope that you've given that leadership, Alison, that you will go from, that you will take this challenge and run with it. And thank you for giving me the platform.
Thank you, Simon. I'm hoping people can hear me now. Thank you that was a fantastic, and looking at the comments box, Simon, inspiring start to our day. And people really enjoyed hearing your personal story, because I think it resonates. It resonates a lot with purposes of so many of our universities today out there. So there are questions coming through now. There was one earlier on, which was, it's a question that I'm sure you'll have had many times before, Simon, which is saying attracting people who are ethnically diverse in some sectors, like the built environment, is particularly difficult. Do you have any tips on how we can do more to reach ethnically diverse talent? What advice can you give us there?
Well, be bold, be brave, and be on the front foot to go into communities and say, we've got the best academic institution on the planet. And it can be, and we want it better. The only way we can get it better is by you coming into our institution.
Okay.
The second thing is, the second thing, of course, is that you've got to show that you've got the leadership. More black, Asian, and minority ethnic staff, professors, school governors, because it's not enough to talk the talk. You've got to walk the walk too. You want to attract diversity, but you must be diverse too. And say to them, we're all on a journey, but have a plan. I think the Race Equality Charter helps that with that framework. If you haven't got it, you should have it. Come on, stand up, be counted. Yeah. This is about leaders, and you are leaders.
Thank you, Simon. I do think this is particularly for governing bodies who themselves want to become more diverse. It's the pipeline, the talent. How do you find it? Where do you find it? And you said something really important to me, which has changed my view of how we're going to get people onto our governing body, which is, you said to me in that conversation when you threw down the gauntlet, you said, you hear people in rooms talking about how do we tackle this problem? And I wonder what Sarah would say, who's the black person in student admissions. And you said, don't think what Sarah would say. Get Sarah in the room and Sarah will tell you what she thinks. Right. So create the environment where Sarah can, or Peter, or John, or Leroy, whoever it is, can come in and tell you what they think. And that was behind my thinking when I created this lead executive post to deliver on our race. And I'm thinking, how do I make this attractive for a black person to apply and appoint somebody who can get their voice in the room for us? And in terms of our board, I'm thinking about, of all the people I know in the sector who I wouldn't normally think about as a board member, I'm thinking actually they'd make a fantastic board, and I'm tapping them on the shoulder now and saying, look, this is coming up. I want an application from you. And what we do know is that sponsorship is so important in terms of the BAME community.
It's really important. It's really important, Alison. But here's a caveat to that: we need more diversity on the boards, but we also need allies. Yes, it's those allies that because there's nothing worse than being a black person on the board, and then when it comes to a race, they all said, "And you, Simon?" Every juncture, you're thinking, "Oh my gosh, I've got to be." Look, share it, and at times, Alison, when you speak about race as a white woman, how can I say this? Because it's the truth. Sometimes when you say it, it's more powerful than when I say it. And that is a matter of fact. And it's owning that leadership to say, look, I want this to be better. I always say, and I hope your governors listen to this, resonates with them, that when we get this right, we're more inclusive, we're more representative. Our offer is to all communities. This is not a zero-sum game. No. Because I win, Alison, doesn't mean that you lose. When I win, we all win. The whole becomes greater than the sum of its parts. We become more dynamic, more creative. It's more exciting.
And if anybody wants the bottom line on this, is the famous McKinsey's report, which showed that more diverse workforces and boards, particularly with black representation, showed a much stronger bottom line at the end of the day. So there's all kinds of evidence for this, as well as, it's the right thing to do. Right, Simon, there's another question here. So what does Sir Simon think are the top 3 biggest changes that we need to make now for a better post-COVID world?
Well, I think there's a real opportunity. There's a real opportunity to do three big things. One is the governance. Get the governance right. And it's not just black faces in high places, it's those with lived experiences that can resonate. That often you can get people that have lived, how can I put this? Not the lived experiences of ordinary black people. So lived experiences and greater representation. You need the staff too. Too often the staff are brought in and on short-term contracts and can't go up the ladder because they're not full-time staff. Get that piece right. And please don't tell me the talent's not out there. That mindset has to change. And the starting point, Alison, is not you're doing anybody any favors. You're doing it because you want your institution to be stronger, more effective. And the second point is that you've got to look at what your curriculum is and what you're teaching. And when I talk about teaching, I'm saying, that for too long we've had an education system that has propagated a world in which Europe is center stage, white people are higher than others. Let's be honest about it. That's we need to review that and have the conversation. And this is not a culture war. This is about 21st century education that is attuned what's gone wrong and what could be better. And the third element is that as part of this change is that you want a plethora of diversity within the student population, and to instill those values. We want you to have a AAA first, or whatever it's called, Aaron. But we want you to leave the door with the set of values where we say, see that person over there, when they go to that high role, they're from our institution. They're from us. And it's no surprise to listen to what they're saying, because we put ethics and values within our DNA. Everything that we do speaks about our values and our ethics. That's why we're proud when we see them on TV, or when we see them as CEOs, or where we see them running institutions.
Quite. So it's funny you mentioned TV, Simon, because there's a really excellent question here. Oh no, heart sinking as I read it. How do we educate a country where we have such violent responses to Sainsbury's using a black family in one of their 3 adverts for Christmas? The thing is this. Look, this has been a monumental moment in our history, in which, in my lifetime, I've never known so many people look through life through partially a black and Asian and minority ethnic lens. It's called empathy, right, Alison? Yeah.
It's called empathy.
Yeah.
And in that, many people have said things are not right. That's the good news. Bad news is there's a small element that want to push back. They take pride in this, what they call anti-woke. The biggest danger about this pushback is that in this moment in history when we can make the biggest transformational change in our lifetime, Aaron, there are those out there, and I'm going to mention no names, that would like to pit anti-racists against white people in general, and in particular against white working class children. It is an uncomfortable truth, but I would implore you with all your hearts to push back on it, because it is a divide and rule. And so when people see a black family in the Sainsbury's ad, they say to them, this is this wokeness, this is what they're saying is that black people cannot be part of the British fabric.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we must not accept that.
No.
Because that is straight out of the Donald Trump playbook. divide and rule. We're bigger, we're better than that. So be smart when you push back. Don't get into the gutter, but just say, you know what, I was pleased to see a British family on the Sainsbury's ad. That is the tapestry of who we are today.
Absolutely. Yes, and all of my training and education was around big organizational change in systems with people in, and there's the thing about critical mass and the momentum, and the critical mass is what you're saying, Simon, about people just saying it, normalizing it, this is our family, and actually and not accepting it, saying it's not acceptable. That is not.
I keep asking everybody to be focused on almost self-interest. The self-interest is that if you create pathways for people to be able to fulfill their potential, and this is what governors are about in education, this is a win-win-win. So, it's easy to use sport, but I've used two analogies of sport in the last few weeks. Lewis Hamilton, a kid from a poorer background, not only become the best driver ever, but he's also become a spokesperson for equality and racial justice. Think about how many more Lewis Hamiltons in other spheres we could have with pathways to success. The other person is Marcus Rashford.
Yes.
Without education, being a leader par excellence, he's a multi-millionaire, and he could drive fast cars, he could have fancy clothes, but he says, can we feed poor kids? Because if we do, what I'm saying to your governors, and I know I'm laboring the point, but I want you to lead, to come out of the shadows of what you think you are to what you really are, and how you can really excel. Because if a young man who doesn't have a university education, like many of you will, and move a nation with what's right, think about what you can do.
Absolutely. The questions are coming in thick and fast now, Simon, so I'm going to try and go through as many as we can.
And I'll give shorter answers.
No, it's fine.
I'm on a Martin Luther King roll. When I get on the roll,
well, if we overrun
pull the plug.
People need to go, they can, but we've got until we could overrun. So this is a really interesting one here. Talent is out there, but we tend to recruit on qualifications and experience. Any best practice on recruiting on a talent basis?
Yes. Yes. One of the big things about spotting talent, two things about it. One is that you've got to have a recruitment process that has a human acute antennae.
Yeah.
And in that human acute antennae, you might see somebody and you look at it and you're thinking, my gosh, there's no privilege at all here. And yet with all the disadvantages, they've still got this far. And when you're speaking to them and you can read between the lines, what you've got to do with that acute antennae in terms of whether it's staff or whether it's students, is that you've got to see inside here about motivation, about potential, and then think that on paper, it doesn't jump out, but my antennae says, this is a good bet. And then once, and because the thing is that if you just go by paper, you wouldn't choose Marcus Rashford. If you go by paper, tick boxing, you wouldn't choose Lewis Hamilton. You've got to have something else to help that through. And then once they're in, you say, look, we're going to invest in you. We're going to invest in this. And I think all results that show that type of thinking, handsome. Who would have put a bet on me, Alison, coming from a council house, leaving with no? I'm not special, but who would have put a bet on me? And I think that I know my mum would.
Yeah. Probably the boss who you threw the car keys back at, he probably would have.
but it is, what I'm saying is, there are a lot of us out there, governors, to work out a new antennae that says we're not going to go by the old mode, because if the old mode is not having different outcomes, then it's incumbent upon you to do things differently.
And there's something about widening your own network as much as you possibly can. I have somebody in mind for the board, and I'm going to say to her, I want you to put in an application. I don't know whether she's ever been on a board. She probably wouldn't tick many of the boxes, but actually she's got a whole wealth of other experience. So it's really rethinking what was the experience you want on your board, and then also taking a leap of faith and saying,
the thing is I don't even think it's a leap of that big faith, because your instinctive is already saying this is the right person. The other thing is, often when we do this recruitment, we have this blind side where for Black, Asian and minority ethnic individuals, we almost want the finished article when we are recruiting. When we look at other people, often we know we haven't got the finished article, but we accommodate them to grow into the place. I'm sorry to use a football analogy again, but I remember Gary Lineker. When Gary Lineker took from football into the presenter chair, it was shocking. I mean, it was just, a mess. It was just embarrassing. Look at him now. He's a master. With the right tools, people can grow into these roles. I think what people knew about Gary Lineker was he was a good kid. He was a great footballer. And, with a bit of polishing, he could be a diamond. We've got to start polishing diamonds.
I love that. So here's a good question. How can boards actually leverage the value offered by diversity? So how can they get? Well,
I mean, I would argue that they would hold sessions and say, look, we're looking for diversity. We want to call in the churches, the mosques, the gurdwaras, the community centres, and the universities need to. I was speaking to Oxford College yesterday. I'm an advisor on one of the universities, and I said to the Oxford College that for them to be real, they need to ensconce themselves in the community and to understand the community, their local community, bring people in. If you bring people in from the community just for an afternoon tea session. You invite community people in, and then as part of that, you've got this antenna. You got this antenna again, Alison, looking for talent, looking for people who can point you to talent, and so you're not blind. You're not waiting for that magic person to walk through the door, because you've invested in those community aspects around you, in which you'll be able to see the talent and the potential talent emerge over a period of time.
Absolutely. There's a question here is, once you get beyond representation, I'm trying to find it because there's so much floating around here, but it's along the lines of, once you kind of get to the point of representation, how else do you know when you're succeeding?
Outcomes. Outcomes. How people are feeling. You want people to say, this has been the best experience of my young life, and I will sing this from the rooftops. Of course, you want good grades. But I would argue you want people to feel confident, strong, ambitious. You want people busting a gut to be in your institution. And you're the governors. What I think about, I tell leaders, one of the good things about being a leader is this, that often your strategy starts off like this, Alison.
Yeah.
And think about that for a second. That you paint the picture, you write the narrative, and that's only limited by your ambition.
Yes, absolutely. There's quite a long comment here. which is kind of linked with government, but it's really making your point, Simon, about, there are also issues with, the stratification of our society based on wealth and a whole range of other sort of privileges, really. And I think it's just highlighting, it says, how do we reconcile all of that with just outreach when the issue starts with, it says here, with funding structures from government. If you can't afford it, you can't do it.
Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, look, what I'm proposing that you change the world, right? And then you're thinking, yeah, we'd like the idea, but in practical terms,
yeah,
I understand that.
Yeah, I know
but the starting point is ambition. The starting point is vision. And then you put bite-sized chunks down. And so, in this session, let me say to your governors, we can't do it all today, but starting the framework. All right, what is the priorities for us? Woolley's asked us to be ambitious, so let's be ambitious. Let's have that splurge. Then we can break it down to what would the priorities be? What is the time? Just keep breaking it down. And then you come up with a doable plan that can A to B to success.
Fantastic. And there's something here which is really saying, as Mary Kernup saying, oh my goodness, our meetings, governing body meetings, are sort of ploughing through lots of, she says, turgid papers. How do you saying this, Mary? And are not visionary and not promoting these conversations. So that says to me, as governing body members or chairs, demand these papers, demand this ambition, demand the vision that you've been encouraging us, Simon, I think, to be bold and brave enough to have.
I mean, otherwise you can't see the wood through the trees.
No.
And you miss, what are we about? What are we for? And you need to have that space, because getting that right actually should drive the turgid papers about how you do it. Yeah. But if you're stuck in the and you're not zooming out, look, when people push back at you on this, say to the chair of governors, Simon says.
Yeah, Simon says. Yeah, that's what I've used that. It does work, Simon says.
This is real.
What a wonderful, I'm looking at the time, and I think Simon says is a wonderful point to end on. Thank you for opening this conference. Thank you for being such an inspiring speaker. I know you've been inspiring because I've been reading it so many times in the chat box here. I think you've given us a lot to think about, really challenged our current practices. And I have a feeling in my antennae that people will go out and take some actions as a consequence of you speaking to us today.
Well,
thank you.
It's been a wonderful conversation. I hope that you have such a wonderfully productive day. I hope to hear back from you and the governors about what plans they do. This is not a chit chat for the chattering classes. This is an action plan to change our world.
It is, absolutely, Simon. Thank you. Well, we'll leave you free now to go off and change other aspects of the world. I know you've got a busy agenda. Thank you for your time today.
Nice to see you again, Aaron.
We're all going to take a break now, and I understand we're back at 11. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, in the meantime, there are plenty of network things that you can visit, but I'm going to tune out. I'll pass you back to Aaron. And bye-bye, Simon. Thank you.
Thanks, Alison. Yeah, we've set the bar really high for the rest of the day. We've got a 10-minute break now. We'll be back in plenary then, when we'll hear from the chair of the board of Surrey and the chair of CUC, the Vice-Chancellor of the University of the West of England, and Martha Longdon, who's the chair of the Office of Students student panel, and we'll be discussing governance in a new normal, how we cope with governance in the conditions we find ourselves in. But see you all at 11 o'clock. Thank you very much.